I think we can all agree that Sony are currently dominating the market with their fast improving technology and fantastic influencer marketing. But does that mean that there's an overwhelming bias because of this? When the LUMIX S9 was initially announced, it was met with a fair deal of negativity, yet when the ZV-E10 Mark II was announced, everyone had nothing but great things to say about it. And let me explain why that was kind of alarming to me. Also, I just want to say that if you did want to contribute and comment down below on this very topic, then please watch the full video before you do that, because I'm sure there'll be people out there that'll be ready just to press send on a hateful comment without actually hearing me out, so do that first. There were 5 reasons that seemed to turn people against the S9. No mechanical shutter, no EVF, the recording time limit, no hot shoe, and the price point. It does, however, have LUMIX's amazing IBIS, and it has the exact same full-frame sensor as the S5 II and the S5 IIX. The Sony ZV-E10 Mark II has no mechanical shutter, it has no EVF, it has no IBIS, and it's a crop sensor camera, featuring the same APS-C sensor that was used in the A6700 and the FX30. It does have a hot shoe though, and there's technically no recording time limit, but we'll get more into that later with the overheating tests. So let's talk about price for a second. The ZV-E10 Mark II body only will set you back just shy of £1,000, and the LUMIX S9 is priced at £1,499 body only, although I've seen it as cheap as £1,099 brand new here in the UK. I think it's fair to say that any full frame camera will naturally have a higher price compared to a crop sensor camera, and you can see this among Sony's lineup as well. In fact, the closest camera in Sony's lineup to the S9 in terms of spec is the A7C Mark II, a full frame compact rangefinder style body with no mechanical shutter, 5-axis image stabilization, and no recording time limits. But that costs £2,000 compared to the S9's £1,499, or £1,099 if you're shopping at Cotswold Cameras. It does have an EVF though, so I guess you're paying an extra £500 for that luxury. In terms of build quality, the S9 feels far more substantial, while the ZV-E10 Mark II feels quite plasticky. I recommend you go to your local camera store and hold both cameras to see what I mean. The S9 is about 110 grams heavier than the ZV-E10 Mark II, which isn't that much more when you take into account the bigger sensor and the sensor shift's stabilization system. The ZV-E10 Mark II does have a better grip though, but those with bigger hands may feel like a giant holding it. Since both cameras are missing an EVF, the LCD screen is going to be quite important, and the S9 screen has 76% more resolution at 1.840K dots compared to 1.040K dots. It also has a higher maximum resolution of 6K compared to 4K. But anyway, let's get into the biggest complaints, starting with the recording time limit. With the S9, you'll be limited to recording takes up to 15 minutes in length in most video shooting modes. It's a bummer for some, but check this out. I performed an overheating test with the ZV-E10 Mark II and the S9 since the recording time limit was more than likely imposed due to a lack of fans on the small body. In order to do this, I had to restart the recording on the S9 every 15 minutes. The temperature in the room was probably around 26 degrees, so just a little bit higher than regular room temperature due to the good weather that we've been having recently. And it took around 25.5 minutes for the Sony to display the overheating icon for the first time, and then it completely died as we approached the 30-minute mark. At around 34.5 minutes, the S9 displayed the overheating warning, but it continued for another 9 minutes before stopping its recording at around the 43-minute mark. What's really interesting though is that even after all of that time, it still didn't switch off like the Sony did, and instead it just displayed a bunch of functions that were temporarily disabled until the unit cooled down. That does actually mean that the camera could still be used for still shooting even after it reached its boiling point. So my question to LUMIX is, can't you just increase the recording time limit to at least 30 minutes if the camera can actually handle it? It seems like it would be a logical thing to do or change in a firmware update, and I'm sure then that would entice some of the people that were initially put off by that 15-minute recording limit. However, the story doesn't stop here because of course Sony allows you to override the heat warnings in the menu for longer recording sessions. I activated this option in the menu and tried again, and this time the ZV-E10 Mark II was able to go for over an hour before I touched it and got too scared to continue. So why can't LUMIX just add an override option like Sony did? And if they did do that, would that change things for you? Let me know in the comments. The ZV-E10 Mark II was marketed as a vlogging content creator camera, and for the most part so was the S9. And for me, the two most important aspects of shooting this style of content would be autofocus and stabilization. So let's compare those now. I've actually got the subject speed and sensitivity set to right in the middle, so 4 and 4 in the case of the Sony, and I'll do the same for the S9 as well, just so it's a fair test so you can see really where each brand would sort of consider the middle of the line with their AF algorithm. From what I can see on the LCD, this looks quite natural. I don't like it when the autofocus is a bit too quick, because I like it to feel a little bit more like, I don't know, organic. Again, this is sort of the middle of the ground. It can be quicker, and also it's worth noting that I'm still using the same lenses on both cameras, so the 16-50 for the Sony, and I've got the 20-60 kit lens for the S9. And I can already tell that looks a lot more rapid, and you know, it's absolutely no doubt that Sony has got fantastic autofocus, but I think you guys will be shocked as well when you see the LUMIX footage. And I really hope that this sort of test does show people that LUMIX's autofocus now is extremely snappy. If anything, it's as good as Sony's. As you can see, the LUMIX autofocus holds up compared to the Sony's autofocus. And I think for the sake of vlogging, you shouldn't have any issues with either of these cameras. LUMIX truly did a great job when they first unveiled their Phase Detect AF system. And as new firmware continues to get rolled out, it only keeps getting better. As I mentioned earlier, the ZV-E10 Mark II doesn't have in-body image stabilization and relies solely on electronic stabilization. The S9 does have physical IBIS though, already giving it a leg up for vlogging and content creation. As you can see, the steady shot mode does something compared to having absolutely no electronic stabilization, but it's not going to blow your mind, and I'd definitely be inclined to either add weight to the setup or to get a small gimbal. And also keep in mind that the 16-50 also has optical steady shot, so all of the examples you're seeing from the Sony are also technically a combination of the two. The S9 on the other hand is fantastic for its stabilization. In fact, it's just as good as the bigger S5 cameras. I've shot so many times with the S9 handheld and got amazing results. The E-stabilization mode set to standard or high, coupled with a physical IBIS, will give you gimbal-like results, and for me this is probably one of the biggest selling points of LUMIX altogether. You'll find that you're able to get more usable shots, and therefore you'll just have more fun shooting. The ZV-E10 Mark II on the other hand will definitely cause headaches if you intend on using it handheld for B-roll or for vlogging, and I think the proof is in the pudding. Another huge plus of the LUMIX S9 over the ZV-E10 Mark II for the very use case that they're both intended for is OpenGate, and that's essentially a fancy way of saying full sensor readout. Most cameras will give you a 16:9 image despite the sensor being 3:2, meaning you're losing the top and bottom portion of the sensor. And this matters in the context of content creation, since everyone wants to be able to deliver both vertical and horizontal versions of what they shoot, so the content is better optimized for social platforms. Therefore, you'll have a much better experience using the OpenGate mode on the S9 if you did want a vertical and horizontal output, while the ZV-E10 Mark II will likely require you to record either two separate takes, one vertically and one horizontally, or you just need to shoot much wider. When it comes to overall image quality, they're both superb. I was very impressed with S-Log3, and I must say that the dynamic range looks great too. Back when I used to shoot with Sony cameras, I found the footage very hard to grade, but now it's as easy as grading Vlog in my opinion. On paper though, the S9 sensor is still better in terms of dynamic range and rolling shutter, as you can see in this comparison on CineD's database. I had to compare the A6700 to the S5 II since there's no database available just yet for the S9 or the ZV-E10 Mark II, but remember that they share the same sensors as those aforementioned cameras, so the performance will be pretty much identical. I think the case that I'm starting to build here will hopefully prove to you that, as I said at the start of this video, people are somewhat biased towards Sony, and it doesn't even stop there. For content creators and vloggers, I'm sure a faster turnaround with less editing would be welcomed, and that's another strength of the S9 over the Sony. The real-time LUT function allows you to bake in two different LUTs at any given time, while also giving you the power to change the intensity of those LUTs as well. I don't really want to delve too deeply into this since I've made quite a few videos covering the real-time LUT function, and you can check them out here on the cards appearing on your screen now. But essentially, it gives you the power to use all of the dynamic range from Vlog while also getting a great look in camera without the need to color grade. The ZV-E10 Mark II does allow you to import your own LUTs as well, but the feature is super primitive in comparison and doesn't have nearly the same level of flexibility. In fact, as far as I could see, there's zero flexibility whatsoever, so essentially you just import your LUT and pray that it looks good. The last feature to uncover is the hot shoe, or lack thereof, on the S9. The ZV-E10 Mark II does have one, so that's great if you want to use external flashes or external triggers. But in my 6 years of making content for brands and my 3 years of making YouTube videos, I've probably used a hot shoe on my other cameras a grand total of like 3 times. So it may be a big deal for some, but for others it really won't. So, if you've made it this far, tell me why the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II got so much love on its release, yet everyone decided to bash on the S9. We're talking about a camera with better stabilization, similar AF performance, better screen resolution, a bigger sensor, better dynamic range, better flexibility for vertical and horizontal shooting, the ability to shoot in 6K, and better malleability of your image in camera to cut down editing time. Sure, it's a little bit more money, but I'd pay more money for all of those upgrades. In fact, I'd probably have paid the extra £500 just for the full frame sensor, let alone all of that other stuff. So let's just stop pretending that there's not a bias there and that you're not being manipulated into purchasing certain gear just because the bigger creators on this platform told you to.